a coffee drinker?
Yes, I am.
Me too.
Yeah, it's yummy in the morning for sure.
I need all the warm goodness. Is so good. My first book was called Not Without My Coffee, and it's a book about journaling. And I always said to myself, I just can't ever imagine journaling. Oh, me and Victoria. I can't ever imagine journaling without my cup of coffee. And so the book ended up being called, Not Without My Coffee.
Yeah.
So we're live. So good morning, everybody. Hello, I am Vihil, Vigil, women's empowerment coach and founder and creator of the Empowerment Empire. And I have with me Patricia Heredia-Morris. Super excited to be moving along in our really awesome program. We are hosting all month long the International Women in Business May Money Talks Mastermind. Now, what is this all about? So the exciting thing is that every year for the third year, so this is our third year of doing our Young Women Entrepreneur Education Foundation fundraiser. Our goal is to raise $5,000 in 30 days. So register as a business owner or as an Empowerment Empire partner to help us reach that goal so we can continue providing scholarships to women on an annual basis who are interested in growing their own businesses and creating the life that they really have been striving for, for themselves and for their families. So with that, we always feel that promoting financial literacy during the month of May is just so crucial. During January, we're reveling in the new year. During February, we do our power planning. During March, we talk about maintaining and finding that passion in our lives. April, we always have a special guest. And then May, we always talk about money. So May Money Talks Mastermind. And the program is near and dear to my heart because we didn't really grow up talking about financial matters around the kitchen table, around the dinner table. There was typically one person in the family who dealt with all the finances and didn't really share that information with the rest of us. So about 3 years ago, I read a book by Carrie Schwab Pomeranz, Charles Schwab's daughter, and it's called How to Talk to Your Family About Money. And this book to me was just so mind-opening. And I thought to myself, why don't we talk about money? Is it cultural? Is it because, some of us are girls? Like, what was it? And I think a lot of it certainly is cultural. I think not just for Latin cultures, but for a lot of cultures where the males typically handle the money and the finances and make those decisions. So me, being the questioner that I am, was like, nope, we're going to change that. Let's talk about it. So this is week 3. And we are talking to an amazing, awesome lady. And I would like to grab her information here. Super excited. Let's see. I'm going to post your information as well so we can get your details. I have her, Patricia Heredia-Morris. She's going to be speaking with us today about financial literacy. I'm posting her contact information as well here on our live Facebook. So I will be monitoring our Facebook information in our Latina Entrepreneurs Jefas Unidas Facebook group. And then also when we get the video over to YouTube, make sure that you like us and subscribe and you follow us along and place your comments so I can get them back to Patricia and she can answer those questions for you. Good morning. Welcome so much to the show.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to be here. I've been actually so excited just to jump in and be a part of this amazing opportunity that you set for everybody, and handling your huella, like I would say, creating that awareness and then giving us an opportunity to share a message as well. Such a treat to be here. I'm super excited.
I'm so glad. Yeah. And also, if people haven't noticed, all of our speakers are also business women of diversity. So not only are we talking about money, but the leaders who are sharing information, such as yourself, are strategically and intentionally chosen to be women of color and women of diversity and women who are supportive of women of diversity. So I'm looking forward to seeing your presentation today. What do you have for us?
Okay, let's see if I can grab my information. And let's see here, real quick. Okay. see if I can find my info real quick. Sorry about that.
No problem. While you're looking, I'm going to talk to you all about sort of some of the next plans that we have. So in the May Money Talks Mastermind, we have been featuring women who are talking to you about forgiving previous money decisions that were made with the information you had at the time. We talked about how to organize your finances in a manner in which that separates your personal from your business if you are a business owner. We have been talking about how to really strategize and take particular steps every single day to be able to get you to that next point, that next step in where it is that you want to be going in your life. So I feel like Patricia, your program of financial literacy, financial wellness, and empathy is just fits right on in with some of the really awesome presentations that we have today. I'll go ahead and silence that telephone for now. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Can you see the presentation okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, one of the things that I've learned throughout the way as I first started this journey is there's so much information, and just being a part of actually seeing some of your presenters present, and then also being around other folks. There's so much information out there, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. But what I've noticed is that maybe it's just me, the type of person that I just like to share information with folks, but it has to do also with how you approach that wellness and with empathy, and how that that creates that part of that. So a little bit about me. I actually was born in Mexicali, which is the border city of Baja California, and a well-proud Cachanilla, that's what they call us as a nickname. But I was born there, and at a very young age, before I even turned one, mom and dad decided, you know what, we're going to move to the US and we're going to relocate. And we're going to start this journey. And as all of us know, we're very present of how those components are as we build our lives here in the US, what that looks like. That language barrier that mom and dad experienced, along with all the financial piece of it. So being around that a lot, I was very present when my dad, when he asked questions about financial information, how he was quickly dismissed because he was not, because of who he was, the language barrier piece of it played a big part of it. He didn't understand, although he had good questions, but he was quickly dismissed. So I realized at a young age that the empathy part of it was something difficult for me to understand, even though I think I felt it, but I didn't know what it was all about. So when I started my journey, I actually started my journey doing this financial literacy about 2 years ago, and really being present with it about a year ago, and really trying to make my connection with my personal why and what that looks like for me. And I actually had an opportunity to watch an actual presentation from someone that really kind of came to mind. So what I'd like to present today is just financial literacy and empathy awareness, and then the values that go with that, and then what's important to you, and then create some steps for our journey, for your journey. So hopefully that will make sense for you guys as we go along. So as a year ago, as I was searching, trying to figure out connections as to what my personal why was, I actually had an opportunity to watch this TED Talks from Michael Thomas Jr. And I actually put the information up there if you guys are interested, but he actually talked about the story beneath the numbers and how to connect with that. And at that point, when I saw his presentation, I realized that's what we need to do more of. When we're actually speaking to people, we need to find out what's the story beneath their numbers, because sometimes we we speak to them and we're only focusing on those numbers, and we don't really get to know what's behind all that. Or, are there certain things that maybe some bad habits they have, or maybe some continued recurring habits from generations to generations that they're not aware of, that we do all the time without even thinking. And one of the things also that he mentioned was we make snap judgments about someone's character and level of education or their ability to make sound decisions just based on their numbers, without really taking the time to find out, how did they get there? Is there someone or something to connect this information to, and instilling some of that conversation? So it starts with empathy, showing that conversation with empathy and figuring out what's beneath those numbers. So he actually created a big step of awareness of what direction I'd like to take moving forward, as far as, sharing information about financial literacy and what that looks like for folks. And one of the things that always I think is kind of funny is, like, sometimes when we have these conversations, we're quickly to make some decisions about that individual. So on this is just a fun little picture. One of the things that I like to share is when we see, is there such a way of trimming a tree correctly? So on here, you'll see 3 different pictures of 3 different trees that have been trimmed differently, right? And then which one do you think is going to affect their growth? I mean, when you look at the pictures, which one do you think is going to grow sooner, depending on how they were cut? So,
good question.
I always think that, man, I'm a plant and flower person, so I relate to conversations when it comes to trees like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always got to thinking, well, depending on how you trim the tree, but is there a correct way to trim the tree?
Absolutely. My dad has talked about that my whole life.
Oh, and my brother, before he passed away, he actually was, he would come over and help trim my dad's trees, and they would have this intense conversation about, you're doing it the wrong way. This is the right way. And I mean, is there really, right? I know, is there really a right or wrong way to have this, some of these conversations? And this is how we frame our stories, right? We frame our stories by the things that we learn, by the way they're presented to us. And along with that, when we're presenting the information, when we do it with empathy. So kind of an example of how, which story is the correct way. And that's how we frame our effect and our awareness, right? This is how, by seeing some of those pictures, we start to think, okay, which one is the right way to trim the tree? And this is another example of how we frame the things that we think about. We frame the things of some of the things that we share and we learn about. So very often we draw different conclusions from the same information depending on how it's presented. So I have a couple examples here. So the first one is, Alice hears that her favorite candidate is killing it with a 45% rating. Then the second one is, Sally hears that her candidate is disappointing the country with a 45% rating. Both of them have the same statistic, but it's the way we presented it. So pretty much like financial literacy, it depends how we present the information and how excited we are about sharing that information, and along with that, sharing it with empathy. And it really comes down to the interpretation of that information. And is there a right way and there is a wrong way, right? I mean, it all goes back to my tree trimming picture. Is there a right way or is there a wrong way? In this case, there's an example of the different percentages presenting, and one is, an excited that you're killing it, and the other one is a disappointed. So it goes back to how we're presenting and that framing and effect of our message that makes so much difference in preparation for our awareness. And this I find really fun too. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect awareness. And I thought this was kind of fun. So you don't know what you don't know. And very often And I give an example of an ice cream here. A few weeks back, my sister was visiting here, and she's not one to really, go out of her comfort zone as far as tasting foods or being very daring to do any of that. And, some of us are. My dad's like that too. He's very basic. He likes his certain foods as prepared a certain way. And if they're not done a certain way, then okay, we have to start over again. But she was here visiting, and she said, you know what, my husband and I were going to run an errand, and she stayed with Dad. And she says, bring some ice cream back. And so I thought, you know what, this is an opportunity to share with her something different. So we stopped by an ice cream shop, and it's a plant-based ice cream. It's all vegan. And I brought her back a chocolate chip cookie. And my husband loves it. He thought it was so good. And I thought, okay, he likes it. My sister's for sure is going to like it. So I brought her the ice cream, didn't tell her where it was from. And she says, oh, this is so good. And she just, was so excited about this ice cream. After she finished, I told her what it was. I told her what the ingredients was. I told her where I got it from, and was able to share something different. So there again, you don't know what you don't know, right? You consistently say things about things that you talk about, but that you're not going to like it, you're not going to taste it, but then once you taste it, you like it. So it kind of goes also with our spending plan and our budget, right? Very often when you begin a conversation with folks and trying to figure out what those numbers look like, what those financial background information looks like, very often, especially some of our families that are underserved, they don't know what all this is about. It's overwhelming. And this is where the empathy kicks in, trying to teach some of this awareness to folks that are trying to make a difference in their life, but they don't know how. And then you come and present all this crazy stuff, and it's a lot of information. So one of the things that I've noticed is that when you're trying to create that spending plan, very often they think it's just an income and expenses. They don't think of anything else. And it kind of goes back to sharing that information, what's it all about, and taking baby steps to be able to reach that family or reach that individual in an empathetic way, instead of being very aggressive in trying to push things upon individuals, and then they get turned off because they don't understand. So, but there again, the conversation always continues when they continue to say, you don't know what you don't know. And they defend that. They defend that I do know, but then in reality, they don't. So you just have to kind of, figure out that connection and approach each conversation with empathy. And then once you do know, the more you know, the less confident you are, because now you've realized, okay, I've learned all this information. So for example, I have here the different vehicles of retirement. So now you've learned all these information, you learned all your options, and now you have to become aware of the choices. Which one is the best beneficial for you? So now you're excited because you know all this information, but then now you're less confident because you're trying to make the right choice and the right fit that, is going to be with you. So that's kind of going back to some of the information of the tree and how there is no right way. Everybody's a little different. Everybody creates their basics a little different, and we just have to continue speaking with some of those empathy. And then also with that comes the money values. So what are those things? Money are like values, and each one has a different thing for different people. So our personal values are different for each one of us. Our values move us in the deepest levels because they are pure and they're undiluted emotions. And they also have their life emotional payoffs, and they have significant, each one of them, they do have significant particular information for us. So some of the values, I'll be sharing some of examples in the next slide of how that information is so important as far as presenting the information. for the empathetic part of it. And they do have significance. Our values have significance, and then they try to connect them in with our money values as well. So on this particular slide, I have an example of what are your core values and your beliefs, and then you start creating your own steps. So in here I have a couple examples of my own particular values. So the first one is, the bottom one is more time with my family. So creating an opportunity to have more time with your family, and then the freedom, and then being the best I can be. And along with that are some other examples of some of those core values. And these are just examples. Everybody has their own core values, and sometimes they're hard to figure out, because when you really sit down and you think, what are my core values? One of the examples here is independence, and your pride, accomplishments, and you have achievements, and you have balance, and you're making a difference, and then creating that inner peace for yourself. So these are just simply some of the core values that you can think about, and building those steps as we go along. Because once you build your steps with your core values, then it's easier to connect the money values to it, and then your goals to it as well. And of course, keeping in mind that sometimes when you speak to people, they don't know, or they do have an idea of their values, but connecting them with empathy helps them realize, I do have important values, and having those empathetic conversations help move along the conversations a little better. Here's a more example. Values are intangible reasons, and they have an emotional payoff for us as well. So another example of this is safety and security, and your sense of balance, and then also compassion. And sometimes you don't know you have these things. And compassion is one of the things that I have in my heart, and I feel strongly how important it is to be compassionate towards others. And I think maybe in the last 5 to 6 years since I've been caring for my dad, I'm a full-time caregiver for my dad, I've realized that the compassion and the empathy is so helpful, not only for your aged parent, but for anyone that you speak to. And then Baltazar Gracian, this is one of my favorite things that he mentions, is self-reflection is the school of wisdom. So once you have your self-reflection about what those core values are, what they mean to you, what they mean to your family, and then you can easily connect the dots as you go along. And then building sturdy steps for today, and then for your future as well. And then what does that look like? And these are some probing questions that I found that helped me create that connection to my values, and then also to your goals, and that connect to your financial literacy awareness and what that looks like for all. And sometimes you have to take 2 or 3 steps backwards to kind of figure out what those values are, and then connect everything as you go forward. So where are you today? And it's never too late to start, to begin, or to restart, or to get a fresh start. It's never too late to get that fresh start again. And then pause and rediscover. So just pause for a moment and figure out what are those values that's going to help you in the future with your financial literacy, and then rediscover those values, rediscover them, and start to connect them into your financial literacy awareness. And then the milestones, we always talk about celebrating those milestones, even if they're just baby steps, recognizing 2 or 3 values, that how you're going to connect them with your financial literacy awareness. It's exciting to celebrate those milestones. And the next one is being honest and accurate, and be prepared. And honesty is sometimes really difficult, because when you are sitting with someone, especially if we have a lot of debt or a lot of things in play, we tend not to be honest about them, because we're embarrassed. We're embarrassed about what we're bringing to the table. It's too much to manage. It's embarrassing for us. So being honest and accurate, and then being prepared, makes a world of difference as well. And then what are those money saving actions? Do you need to rebuild, or do we need to start over? What does that look like for you as well? And then the vehicles towards your personal independence. What are the different vehicles that there are available? And everyone is different depending on, what their personal goals are and their personal situations are. And then find that support for the long-term vision as well. And once we sit with a family and figure out what that financial literacy awareness is and what that plan looks like, and then we can figure out what that long-term vision. Sometimes families don't have a long-term vision because they're just striving for daily survivor. They don't really think about, is there a long-term vision that I need to look at or consider? And because it's a day-to-day struggle for them. So creating that awareness that there is an opportunity for that, and then changing our mindset about personal finances and money. And I heard this particular sentence in one of a different workshop that I was at, and it really caught my attention when it says, we cannot solve a problem with the same mindset that created the problem. So I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just perfect. And trying to teach financial literacy is a concept that you have to come with an open mind and be ready to listen to the good news and be ready to listen to the bad news, because that's the only way how we can create a really good plan for an individual as far as teaching that financial literacy. So I thought this was really good, changing your mindset that created the problem to begin with. So, going in with that, it makes a world of difference as well, that awareness. And then the plan to exit your debt, that's a strategic plan of how that looks like, and what are the plans to moving forward. And then what are you leaving behind as your legacy? One of those things that we talk about too is what is it that you would like to leave? What's important to you to leave behind as a legacy for you, for your family? And then a safe space to think and to talk about personal finance literacy, and what are the repeated generational habits and the multi-generational tendencies about money? What are they? Let's help identify what they are. And this kind of goes back with having a conversation with empathy, because once we find out what those tendencies are, because sometimes we do them and we don't realize we're doing them. I can give you an example of something. When I first told my family, I want to jump in and do this because I really think it's exciting, there's a lot of doubt that came from my immediate family, and my feelings were really hurt because those are the multi-generational thoughts that we've been subconsciously, we just have them. And after my feelings were really hurt, and then I started really doing research on my own, I was thinking, you know what? They need to be taught anyway. They need to have this awareness. Even if you think you're in the right place, it doesn't hurt to learn a little more. Every day is an opportunity to learn something new and figure out what those tendencies are. And sometimes we don't know that we have those generational tendencies until we have that empathetic conversation with folks. And then the financial stress that creates a distraction. And then we become disengaged, right? Because we're stressed out about the situation. And I think that's where the empathetic financial literacy conversations come into place, because it is bad news. It's bad news that creates that distraction. Then all of a sudden you just want to give up. You just, okay, it's too much. I'm going to just, disconnect from it. And then you become disengaged. And then there's not a problem solving situation because we're so busy thinking about being disengaged. And sometimes these things happen, and it's a natural effect. And when we have these conversations of financial literacy with empathy, we can recognize those disengagement moments where individuals can say, okay, this is too much. I just need a break. And then figuring out how to have that part 2 conversation with that individual. And then think about the examples of how we can, change our journey, change our vision, and what that looks like as well. So some of these, I know it's a lot, long-winded, but just bullet points of these are just baby steps on how you create that information. And what that journey and then purpose looks like. What is your journey and that purpose? And I think one of the gals that you had on, I think it was it yesterday? I don't remember. She had mentioned how the desire to learn is so important. And then the curiosity goes with that too, because when you have boundless curiosity, the desire to learn will sit in. And I think that's one of the things that created that awareness for me when I finally thought, you know what, I have a lot of curiosity. I want to learn more. I need to learn more. And then now I'm at a point where like, it's a good information. I need to share it with someone in the desire to keep learning. So that builds around that financial literacy and introducing that concept that it's okay to be curious. It's okay to have curiosity and raise your hand and ask those questions. And I think a lot of, especially some of the underserved families, they don't feel comfortable raising their hand. They don't feel comfortable having that curiosity because they haven't been exposed enough that it's okay to ask a question. So helping them build that curiosity and so they can continue that desire to learn is important. And then pushing towards for more positive choices as we build our empathy. We build that empathy with that conversation with these people, with families and with individuals. And then we just keep pushing towards that positive choices. And you'd be surprised how exciting families get when you introduce a concept, you introduce information, and they come to the meeting very stressful. Like the meeting is very stressful to them, but once you show them different options and different choices and how things worked out, they actually feel relieved. And so this is when the positive energy, as far as the individual who's sharing that information, makes a world of difference, right? And then connecting with our culture and our beliefs too. That's so important to be able to have that culture in mind and our beliefs in mind, and recognizing that lack of trust, because it is there. It is there from the very beginning. You're talking about money, you're talking about financial literacy awareness. The lack of trust is just going to be there in the back of their mind consistently. And then breaking the wall, and how we do that. How do we break that wall? And one of my mentors mentioned this GPS, and I thought, oh, I'm going to add this to my presentation because that's really cool. It's the growth, protection, and strategy. And it kind of goes along with your financial awareness and what that looks like. And that GPS just kind of connects right and still into it. So in closing, I wanted to share a couple of statistical information and how inflation has made just a world of difference. And we've all experienced it, physically, the fuel and the transportation and the meat products. And then we see some of these steepest increases that we've had in a long time. And these are statistics that I took from my website. It says 24% of our meat products have increased it, plus the hotel industry also increased 26%. And of course, we're all feeling the 51% increase of that fuel. And I was just reading an article the other day that in some cities in California, it was up to $7 per gallon.
Yeah, it's time for me to go and get gas in my car. And we were, out of town for like the weekend. And when I came back, gas had jumped 10 cents. And so now it's already back to over $6 a gallon when it was like $4.45, at some places. And now I can't find any place under $5 around, North County, San Diego.
Yes, my husband travels a lot for his work, and he was telling me how in certain cities it picked up to a certain time. And I was sharing with him, I said, I was just reading an article. I can't remember the city. I should have wrote it down, that it peaked up to 7. I'm like, that's crazy. I mean, how do we expect to survive at some of these, different things? So these are just fun statistics that I found very
alarming.
Yes, I'm trying to find out the alarming, and then at the same time, my goodness, it's just like, what do we do? How as financial literacy folks and educators, how do we connect with this uncontrollable raising things? And then we're trying to teach people to have that opportunity to learn. So now more than ever is an opportunity to have that awareness and to learn a little bit more and create that awareness. And then also I found this interesting statistic. This is a recent data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that highlights the rising costs across the board. And it shows the specific sectors of experiencing rapid price increases in the past year. So I found this, this chart very interesting, how it has from the 2012 all the way to 2021, and how the inflation is at its highest point in the last 10 years. And this is just specifically inflation that they're talking about, and how scary this statistic is. And then more than ever now is an opportunity for us to learn about that financial literacy awareness, what that is, what that's all about, so we can help balance some of these things that are uncontrollable, beyond our means, things that are gas prices and the scary things that are out there. But do we have control to learn and to have more information about what that financial aspect looks for us as well? So then in my last final fun slide here is just in closing. I just wanted to say, know where you're going and why, and you can get there. So finding those connectable dots makes such a world of difference, and it begins with recognizing your values, what they are, what they look like, so we can help connect them to your actual financial strategy. And these are fun things that I always like to remind folks. The memory and legacy you create today will be a wonderful treasure for generations to come, a gift for future generations. And my dad always reminds me of this too. He says, reaching back and reaching forward for your family is important. So not only are you reaching back to try to help some of these family members or friends that you think might need that financial literacy awareness, but then also reaching forward to help your families. And then having the honor to be here with you, Vihil, is reaching forward to help family and friends, right? To create that awareness, to create that message out there that it's not too late to start. Just creating that awareness and that simple text of, it's okay to raise your hand. It's okay to create those values. If you don't know your values, take an opportunity to find out what those core values are to you, and find that meaning in having a mindful conversation to find out how we can help them connect to your financial awareness and literacy. And this is kind of a recap. This is all I have for today. Hopefully my words made an impression upon you to create that moment of, hey, I do have a question. I'm trying to connect those words. So hopefully kind of this makes sense to everybody. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's kind of wrapping it up for me. Thank you.
Absolutely. We spoke previously during some of our conversations about how, creating that financial wealth, that generational wealth has to start somewhere. And I know that a lot of our sisters, think of that concept and are just like, well, our family doesn't have generational wealth. I know what that is like, coming from, a family that was not, someone down the line previously didn't start the building of that generational wealth, but it truly can start with us. It has to start someplace. And I use the analogy of, the very first Rockefeller did not have what the current, family of Rockefellers have, because it started somewhere. It started with someone in particular that said, I am going to embrace financial literacy and I am going to share it throughout the generations. One of the previous speakers talked about how generational wealth will oftentimes only last for 3 generations, because the first generation was the one that built it. The second one saw the struggle and was careful not to squander it. But the third generation didn't feel the effects of not having that generational wealth. And so our goal moving forward is to continue the education with our families consistently through all future generations, starting from a very young age. You know, I talk to my daughter Victoria all the time, and she just turned 9, about, you know, she wants $5 for Robux so she could play her Roblox game, and she wants $10 so she can, you know, buy a new saddle in Star Stable on all of her video games.
Mhm.
And we've had to have the conversation several times about, yes, I understand that you want these things, but what are you doing? Because it's not just about allowance. It's about, you know, because it's like $5 here, $20 here. And it, you know, over the course of a month, if I were to just say yes to all of her financial requests, it could easily be $100, $200 or more. So we have the conversation now. What is it that you are going to be doing every time you receive money? You know, we have the 3 jars. We don't physically have 3 jars, but we have them in the bank. One is for spending, one is for saving, and one is for gifting. Or for some folks, they call it tithing. So some, you know, gifting, saving, and, you know, spending. And every dollar that you have gets split into those 3 jars. And it's a great way for her to be able to see, just from a very simplistic explanation, that if you control your money and where it goes, your money will not control you. You make those financial decisions for yourself. And if you don't, then those financial decisions will be made for you and probably not in your favor.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. And then I think it reminds me, excuse me, of what you were saying about the 3 different jars, because sometimes if we put basic things like that, you know, examples of the 3 different jars, people can connect with that a little bit more versus this complicated, you know, expense assessment that we trying to present. And very often it's the simpler we speak, the more understanding we are. And I think the values is what's more important. It's really basic. So going back to your 3 jars of those things it just makes it simple. And I think the simpler we explain things, the simpler we have an opportunity to teach, and an opportunity for families to learn, because then they won't be embarrassed to raise the hand. They won't be hesitant to sit behind and not ask those questions, when in reality they do have a ton of questions.
Exactly. Patricia, thank you so very much for joining us today on the International Women in Business May Money Talks Mastermind. I loved your presentation. I loved how you sort of just really broke it down on it's you don't have to be overwhelmed by building your financial literacy. It's like everything that we've been talking about over the course of this program is just take those small steps every day to move the needle closer to your goals, whether it's building a business or creating and starting a new budget, whether it's teasing apart your personal and business finances that you know that you need to do. If it's, you know, teaching your children financial literacy, it's having those conversations with your family to talk about generational wealth and what that means, and discovering the things that you can accomplish when you financially plan from a very young age or an early age. So let's do our future generations, you know, a favor, and let's
Yes.
help them, you know, build their foundations from as early on as possible. I am looking forward to getting to know you more, Patricia. I have a feeling that we will definitely be, you know, connecting again. I will be downloading our video and posting it over to our brand new YouTube channel. So when I post that, make sure that you are liking and subscribing and following all along of the amazing women that we get to feature here at the Empowerment Empire, women who have dedicated their lives to a particular subject and are willing to come on our show to share that information with you, because our goal is to share, inform, elevate, educate. You know, our mantra is through collective collaboration, we all rise. And Patricia, thank you so very much for being a part of that today. I am so truly grateful. And I'm looking forward to seeing more about the information that you put out there on financial literacy. For those of you catching us live, make sure that you put your comments down. If you're catching the replays, please also post your questions, and I will absolutely make sure that our featured speaker for today receives those questions and is able to get back to you. I posted all of her links to her business. Please make sure to reach out to her. Tell her how much you loved her presentation. We are all business women, so make sure that when you are considering hiring a professional for something that you need, for a need that you have in your family or in your personal life or in your professional life or in your business, that you reach out to one another. That's why we are promoting women in business, because we really want you to buy from one another, to support one another, and through collective collaboration, we all rise. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great Tuesday, and we will see you all again tomorrow on the May Money Talks Mastermind.
Adios.
Adios.